Good.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Dory Sidock, and I'm one of the members of the steering committee for the CARC Systems Facing Group. If you haven't joined us before for any of the CARC presentations, CARC stands for Campus Research Computing Consortium, and we're an organization that works to advance and advocate for the research computing and data profession. CARC aims to build an inclusive RCD community, promote best practices, share expertise and resources so we're not all starting from scratch or building our own silos, and facilitate collaboration and partnerships. Each month, different topics are presented across a range of tracks, or what CARC calls facings groups. We have this systems facing group, and others include researcher facing and data facing groups, among others. The CARC administration team helps to facilitate this type of programming along with working groups on a variety of topics that are important to our community. You can get this information and more about CARC in our call document, which is posted in the chat, and we hope you'll take a minute to sign in so we can keep track of who's joining us today. I want to mention that we can take questions during the presentation, but it would be preferred today if we put those in the chat, and then one of the co-hosts will read those aloud to our presenter and he can answer them for us. So you may know that May is Accessibility Month, and CARC has committed to developing program on this important topic across all of its tracks. For our systems facing call, we're pleased to have with us John Heim, Systems Engineer Emeritus. John was the manager of high performance computing at the math department of the University of Wisconsin-Madison for 21 years before he retired in 2022. John has a retinal disease called retinitis pigmentosus. He has been legally blind since he was 22 and has had no useful vision since he was about 30. In addition to his love of math and computers, he's an avid runner and a rock climber. Today, John will share with us some of the tools and processes he put in place to work effectively as a vision impaired system administrator. We hope this information will encourage you to consider how your facility is set up today and what changes could be made to make your workplace more accessible for both current and future employees. So John, I'm going to stop sharing so you can go ahead and get started.
While he's working on that, if we could, there are only about 36 people signed in, and there's about 55 participants. If we could have everybody sign into the call doc, please.
While we're waiting, I'll take this opportunity to plug PERC 25 student program that I happen to have some involvement with. You have students that you're working with, would love to have you send the information out. The posted close date is this coming weekend, so I'll share a link to that in a moment.
And this is like for perk, you said?
Yes, this is for
Wow.
PERC.
I mean, that's coming up in July.
Yep.
John, is there anything we can do to help get you started, or are you having trouble sharing?
It's not capital S. It's not. Unmute.
Did it work?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Ugh, I clicked that unmute button a million times and it didn't do anything. I thought that you had to do something to unmute me. I was like, I don't know why it's not working, but all right. Well, that was stressful.
So sorry, we should have practiced this beforehand.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never had that happen before, but I've done a million Zoom meetings, but I mean, I don't know. I was clicking the unmute button and it didn't do anything. Okay, well, thanks for the introduction. Sorry for the problems, everybody. My name is John Heim. I am almost totally blind. I still have some light perception. I was manager of high performance computing at the math department at the University of Wisconsin for many years. And I'd like to start with a little story. The math department has a server room. I don't know, there's 4 or 5 racks and 2 large refrigeration units in there. And one day, one of our research computers went down. I believe that a student had run some code on it that caused the kernel to crash because it ran out of RAM. I mean, that should happen, but I guess it did. Something went wrong anyway. So I went in up to the server room and I had put Braille labels on all the computers so that I would know which one to push the button on if I needed to do a hard boot. But when I got up there, the dry air from the refrigeration units had caused the labels to curl up and fall off. There's a big puddle of braille labels on the floor. So I'm like, oh man, how am I going to know which one is which? I don't want to just start power cycling computers. So, well, I understand that servers generally have a little LED display on the front that has their name on them, but of course I couldn't see that. So what I did was I went back to my office and logged into all the other research computers that were in this rack and issued the eject command to open the CD drawer. And then by process of elimination, I went up there and said, well, here's the one whose CD drawer is not open. I guess that's it. Power cycled it, and knock on wood, it was the correct computer. Let me see, get back to my notes here. Indulge me for another second. I closed my notes and I was, panicked there.
Of course, take your time.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was that was one example of where, if you're blind, you have to do things by feel. And a lot of times, a systems administrator has to deal with hardware, and you'd be surprised how easy it is for a blind person to do things like swap out memory sticks and replace expansion cards. I did all that, put in hard drives, replaced hard drives, things like that. In fact, in my own home, I usually build my own computers, order the parts from Newegg or someplace like that, and then assemble the computer myself. And the only thing I can't do with respect to building my own computer is to connect up the cables like the power and the reset button and things like that. Those are color coded, and often they have only one place that they connect because the pins just won't match up, but you don't want to rely on that. So I do a blind person doesn't have that much trouble with hardware. In fact, there are quite a few situations where it's convenient to be blind. For example, my coworkers would often just ask me to plug in the cables on the back of the computer if you can't reach them. They're just like, well, John is way better at that than most people, so just let him do it. To boot a computer, what you there's a screen reader called Speakup that is built in by kernel modules, so you can get speech during boot with that system. And I want to play for you a sound file. I hope you can hear it. I recorded one of the research servers at the math department booting. So what you'll hear first is a series of beeps. You can make grub the bootloader beep, and it plays a little tune, Shaving a Haircut. And then it'll start talking, and it speaks really fast, but you'll be able to hear it say, Light Talk found. That's the name of the hardware speech synthesizer. And then later on, you'll be able to hear it say typical boot messages like with recognizing the hard disk and things like that. And finally, at the end, it'll say, I think it's Nitschke TTY login. And then you'll hear me tapping at the keyboard as I log in. Let me play that sound file. I hope you can hear it. Light Talk found. Starting SSH service. Oh yeah, Debian Nishki login. So that is an example of what a blind person would hear when he's booting a Linux computer. And I actually have that same hardware speech synthesizer connected to my desktop right now. It's not going to work, is it? No, it's okay. So that's an example of use of hardware speech, but mostly these days it's hard to find a hardware speech synthesizer. So what mostly people use are software speech synthesizers, and you can actually have the software speech synthesizer recognize the kernel speech and the kernel screen reader called Speakup will actually talk through software speech as well. It doesn't start talking as soon during the boot process as it does if you have a hardware synthesizer. So you might miss, like for instance, if there's a problem with your server doing a network or a hard drive failure, for instance, you have to have the hard drive working in order to get software speech. So that's unfortunate, but at least you can still get speech during the boot process with Speakup. Debian and GRML both support using Speakup during the installation. So you get a character-based interface and you can install the Debian and GRML. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. It is a rescue CD, a distro intended to be run as a live CD, and it will actually it can speak as soon as you're done booting. Generally, what a blind systems administrator will use is a screen reader called Orca. It's for the graphical user interface. And I don't use Windows very much, but I do use Macintosh quite a bit. And I think that Orca is probably a better screen reader than the one that's built into the Mac. At least it's better for systems administrators because it is very well behaved in a terminal window. And I don't know if you heard the screen reader speak. No, it's not. That's not going to work either, is it?
Speech enabled.
There we go. This is Orca.
Home push button. Home 1 of 4 selected. Press Control plus arrow key to change order.
That's Orca running on the laptop that I use to do my Zoom calls.
Speech disabled.
Orca, of course, free and open source software developed originally by Sun Microsystems for Sun OS, Solaris, but ported to Linux, and now, of course, the main development for that is going on for Linux. I do have also have a Braille display. Braille displays are also very useful for blind systems administrators because that is another source of input that can start as the kernel boots. So if you need to know to access kernel messages, you can do that with a Braille display as well. Let's see, the last thing I wanted. And the last thing I wanted to mention was about writing code. I started out my career as a programmer, not a systems administrator, but I thought that all the good programs had already been written. So I thought I would switch to systems administration. And but for the math department, I did a lot of PHP coding and, of course, batch scripting for various operations that had to occur that we had to do with our systems. I guess every systems administrator does a lot of bash scripting. So it actually is more efficient than you would think, programming by listening to the source code. I don't think that I may be a little bit slower than other programmers, but it's sort of canceled out by the fact that I make fewer mistakes, because listening to code, you're not likely to mistake, say, a semicolon for a period. What is the classic error that sent one of the Mars probes off into, crashed one of the Mars probes, where there's a comma instead of semicolon or something like that? Those two sound so different that you're not going to get them mixed up. The one problem that a blind programmer would have is with capitalization. There are a lot of times when I use camel notation for a variable name and didn't have a cap letter in there. Most of these screen readers display capitals by raising the pitch a little bit. So it'll say B instead of B and X instead of X. And that's how you know that it's a capital letter. But you can turn it on so it will actually say capital B, capital X. And then, of course, there's no mystery. I guess that was pretty much all I had to say to talk about the adaptive things that I have done in my career to be successful as a blind systems administrator. If anybody has any questions, I think.
Thanks, Sean. All of that was really interesting. We have one question so far in our chat from Jordan. I've done some work on Grub too, and I've wondered if the play command works on most new computers since they don't have a classic PC speaker anymore. PC SPKR.
Yeah, it doesn't work. I don't think it ever worked on a machine that didn't have a SP, a built-in speaker. Yeah.
So do you just put
Excuse me,
a
but
PC
yeah,
speaker
that
in all
would be a
the
problem.
computers you build?
I'm sorry?
Do you just put a PC speaker in all of the computers you build?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I'm old enough that I remember when they all came with that anyway. But yeah, I just bought it was only like $3 for a little PC speaker. Do I have a way? Oh yeah, this should work. Let me see here if I can get. Well, my keyboard isn't. It's not going over to a. Over to a character window. You know what? In Debian or in Linux, you ought to be able to press Control Alt F1 to get to the terminal window. Oh, actually, you know what? I'll bet it is. I didn't think to make sure that my hardware speech synthesizer is connected up firmly this morning before I got on. I thought I would just play that sound file of you of what a Linux box sounds when it's booting. But yeah, to get back to the question, you do have to have a PC speaker in order to have Grub play a tune when you start. And I don't know of any workaround for that, that's for sure. Fortunately, most servers still come with those things. I think that they need to have that in a server room. It's common enough for some hardware problem to have the computer start beeping. That's still a thing in this world. So servers come with PC speakers, and that makes it easier for a blind person to tell what's going on. I mean, that being able to play a tune is very valuable, because then you know if you need to, say, boot into safe mode, you can have a much better chance of doing that if it plays a tune when it's time to hit the key for the Grub menu.
We got another question in the chat. With how verbose some aspects of the OS/kernel messages and logging can be, I am curious how you approach something like running dmessage when there has been a recent OOM or other such event. And that's from Brian.
Really perceptive questions. Yeah, it's a huge problem. That would be one thing that I would say I'm considerably less efficient at than a cited systems administrator listening to error logs. The big thing is it's going to say the time and date first, and then some other pretty meaningless stuff before it actually gets to the messages. And what I have done in the past is actually piped it through SED and got all that stuff out of there before. So I could only listen to just the meat of the messages. But that in itself is a pain in the butt. So I generally just painstakingly listen to a lot of crap before I find what I'm looking for. Another thing I do is actually redirect the messages into a file and then weed out messages that I know I don't care about by with a grep command and things like that. So yeah, that's a problem.
I was curious, John, if you had any systems in place with the physical hardware in your machine room, like different colored cables. I realize your vision impaired, so
Right.
Colored cables that are similar in color are not going to be useful, but it's something that was very, very different in color, or some kind of way to, mark a cable like don't ever unplug this type of thing.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I do that same kind of thing that other people do, put things on a cable to try to distinguish it from other cables. In the my desktop here right now, I do have a bunch of, I sliced up a milk carton, painstakingly stamped Braille into these little strips of plastic to say which each of the little cables, the reset button, the one that went to the power button, the USB cables. I put plastic strips from a milk carton with Braille strip stamped into them to identify those cables. But I mean, I guess I probably do about the same thing that most people do with a pile of, you got a bunch of network cables coming out of the switch. You just kind of follow it back to see where it goes in order to distinguish one cable from another. That might be another issue though, like for instance, the little LED lights on a switch, a network switch, can't see those. I do have right within reach a light meter. So what I have done in the past, in fact, I taped this to a stud finder. I wanted to hang something, and I taped it to a stud finder so I could move the stud finder across the wall. And when the little LED light came on in the stud finder, it would beep. That's a standard piece of equipment. And then the other thing that I didn't mention is my phone. Let me see if it'll do it.
Okay, CNA, action. Applications, 0, agenda TV, GB, short, 12, 33P, applications, place a system, then, replace, recording, 4 periods, UN, search control plus F.
Okay, so that's my iPhone reading my the screen of my laptop to me. So that can come in handy too. A lot of times, like for instance, when I'm building a PC, it's not, you don't even know for sure if it's going to boot. You need to see if it's going, say, doing the message saying press F8 to enter the BIOS, the setup file, setup system. And your phone can do that for you. Also, if you're booting a, if you're trying to rescue a down server, you can use your phone to tell at least how far it got into the boot process. It doesn't work very well for, there's no screen review features of that app to read your screen to you. So if you miss what it said, you're just gonna have to start over from the beginning again. But with the screen reader, if the screen reader works, then you can. There's screen review keys. You go up until you hear what you wanted to hear.
We had another question in the chat from Bill. Do you have any advice or tips on how working with a team affects your ability to identify things? Example, what are the things coworkers can help with accessibility for you, or vice versa? Or what are things coworkers can help with accessibility for you, or vice versa? Sorry.
Yeah. I think probably being blind is kind of not really a big deal with respect to interacting with other employees. Your attitude, your main attitude is going to overwhelm all the issues that there are related to being disabled. Like some people are just good with other people and some people aren't. And that's going to be, 99% of it. But there are times, of course, when you're going to need help from other people. And well, you as a disabled person, you have to get used to saying I need help, and you have to know when to try to fight through.
He did put in a clarifier. He says that I guess I mean in terms of managing the same hardware or etc. So I'm guessing he's meaning in terms of managing. Are there ways that your coworkers assist you with managing hardware and providing accessibility routes? If I'm guessing that's right, if that's what they're asking.
What can someone do to make a blind person make it easier for them? Well, they have to put up with the computers saying playing a tune every time they boot. Yeah, I can't really think of anything that a sighted coworker has to do to don't pull off the Braille labels. I mean, I don't recall any time when my coworkers, I said, hey, can you help me set up some accessibility feature? I mean, they have to tolerate them, this accessibility things that I set up, but as to actually helping me set up the accessibility features, I can't think of any of those situations like that right now. It seems like there should be things where I said, can you not do that anymore? That makes it harder for me, but right now I can't think of any. Arranging your office, if you share an office with someone, make sure you don't leave stuff in the way that they're going to trip over.
That's a great point. We also had a comment in the chat. Don't describe blinking LEDs by what color they are when helping physically locate them.
Yeah, I have a story, something about something like that. One time, my manager at the math department, her name is Yvonne, and I really loved working with her. But she ran into my office one time, scurried into my office, and she's so excited. She's like, "Look at this! Look at this! Look at this!" She's got an email printout that somebody in the department had done something really foolish, really crazy, and gotten themselves in trouble. She said, "Look at this! Look at this!" And she handed me this printout of an email message, and I sat there for a second, and she put her hands to her head. Oh, I forgot you're blind. Whacked my elbow on the desk here. So she also was a huge fan of the movie Sneakers. I think that's partly why I got the job there, actually, because there's a blind guy in there who could do anything.
We got another question from Jordan. Do you use Xorg or a Wayland session? How well do screen readers and other accessibility tools work with Wayland sessions today?
Man, unbelievably perceptive question. Yeah, that actually is a problem. Right now, I think that mate doesn't work with Wayland yet. I think that's what it is, but it might be that Orca doesn't work with it yet. But yeah, I've been jonesing to switch to Wayland because I've heard it so much faster, but I can't yet. So and there are messages pretty regularly on the support list for that screen reader Orca that I mentioned about people that have switched to Wayland and had a lot of accessibility issues with it. So I haven't tried Wayland yet. I'm still stuck. I'm using, well, my desktops are Debian, and I have a file server in my own house. Doesn't every retired Linux nerd have a server in their basement, like a web server, DHCP server? Yeah, and that is running Ubuntu STS. So they're both running mate, and that I believe it's that mate doesn't fully support Wayland yet.
Any other questions for John? You can also just unmute and ask your question if you'd like.
There is one last thing I wanted to mention. I forgot to talk about during my my speech is that a bunch of us blind systems administrators got together and created a website called linuxaccess.org. And I don't believe that there's as yet is still any actual documentation up there yet. But what we're doing is we're going to build a website that just has all kinds of documentation about how a blind systems administrator can work around various problems, what works and what doesn't, that kind of thing. So linuxaccess.org.
Did you find it more challenging to be a visually impaired system administrator or a visually impaired rock climber?
Well, that's another great question. I just gave a talk yesterday about being a visually impaired rock climber. So it's been a busy week for me in that regard. Yeah, well, it's definitely way harder being a visually impaired systems administrator, way harder. I don't really do anything different than other people when I'm rock climbing. I am belay certified, by the way. So I climb with a group of disabled climbers. And so like last week, I belayed for a guy in a wheelchair. And of course, he wasn't in his chair when he was climbing. What they do there is they have a person with a side climber to place their feet. And then all they have to do is lift their upper body and use their hands to climb. And I was holding the rope, belaying for them. And when you do that, you have to put all your weight on the rope so that they don't have to, they only have to lift their own, move their arms. And so it was pretty cool. I think a blind guy belaying for a person who's paralyzed from the waist down. And that's a pretty cool thing. The one thing I have problems with in terms of being a blind rock climber is that often I have to hold on with one hand while I'm frantically reaching around trying to find the next hold. So
We had another quick question. Do you follow blind surfer Pete Gustin?
I've heard of him, but no, I do not follow him. There are a million people to follow. There's I can't think of what her name is, a young woman who has tried just about everything. She has a like a YouTube feed that, maybe she went surfing, she tried to play the violin, learn how to play the violin, and that's another thing I mentioned in my talk yesterday about being a blind rock climber. When I went blind, I kind of, I don't know, I guess you would say made a pact with myself, try everything, say yes to everything. And that's how I got into rock climbing. I mean, a friend just said, "Hey, would you like to try rock climbing?" Yes. So I can't think of this young lady's name right now, but she has a podcast that or a YouTube feed that I would probably be into listening to. There's a lot of people out there making podcasts about this kind of thing.
Thinking in terms of the challenges, what would you say is the most frustrating piece of software for a
Oh.
blind system administrator?
Well, there are so many things that are, VMware, when it came out, was the installation and setup programs were completely inaccessible. Well, you couldn't even get started though, because there was a splash screen that came on when you're doing the installation of ESXi. It would come up with a splash screen, and you had to put the mouse on this button, and it was just a welcome to VMware. Click here to get started. And I'm like, oh, I'm screwed. I mean, there's nothing I can do. I spent hours trying to just like, maybe if I just got lucky this one time, I could move the mouse around and happen to hit it, but I never did. And the department actually had to hire somebody to to handle VMware for me. I lost that part of my job because of the inaccessible features of VMware. And I actually there's a term for that. It's common enough in with blind people. They get a job, and then they're kind of stuck with whatever technology they knew at the time. And maybe that continues to work, maybe it doesn't, but they have a hard time moving into the new technologies, because almost all new technologies have accessibility features issues at first. Like VMware was terrible at first. I understand it's not too bad right now, but it was terrible at first. And so what can happen to a blind person is gradually their skill set just becomes more and more obsolete, because they aren't assigned to any of the fancy new stuff. And I call that getting backwatered. And I know lots and lots of blind people whose careers were ruined by that. Of course, I was determined to not let that happen to me. But the math department gave up on VMware anyway. It just doesn't work for high performance computing. Knock on wood, I was kind of lucky in that regard. The second hardest thing, of course, is booting. There's a lot of accessibility problems for a blind person with booting. And, like you turn on a computer, nothing happens. How are you going to know? How are you going to figure that out?
Thank you, John. Yet another reason to drop VMware.
Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
Did everybody notice how fast the screen reader talked when I played that sound file? And maybe you noticed when I was fooling around with it, I have it set to speak at about 80% of the maximum.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly fast, and I thought that in and of itself would be challenging to keep up with that.
Yeah. Well, you get used to it after a while. You get better at listening fast.
Thought it was a little impressive, honestly. I couldn't understand it.
Any other questions for John or comments before we let him go? We really appreciate you joining us today. This has been really eye-opening. Sorry. That was really poor pun.
Yeah, that's funny that you say that. We blind people say that to each other all the time. See you later. Ha 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 ha.
I have a question. You mentioned Easy Speak or eSpeak. I was just Googling around. Are there other tools similar to it? I think I see something that come up on a search called Fenry or Fenrer or something.
Yeah. So the thing about
compare?
Speakup, yeah, that's a really another great question. The thing about Speakup is that it is built mostly on kernel modules, and then they use something called eSpeak is a text-to-speech engine, and then eSpeakup is the link between the kernel modules and this text-to-speech engine eSpeak. So you have to have all three of those parts installed in order for it to work. But well, Speakup can use a hardware synthesizer, so you can get speech during booting because it's a kernel built into the kernel. It can be built into the kernel. And other screen readers like Orca and Fenray, which are Fenray is another screen reader for the Linux command line for character interface. Those can't speak during booting. So they sort of serve different purposes in that way. You have to kind of use two different screen readers, one during the boot process, another one once the user interface starts up. So FenRay is used at a character on a character screen by when you're already about to log in, for instance, you can use it. And then after you log in. Windows and Mac, though, well, I don't know about Mac for sure. I've never really been a Macintosh systems administrator, but Windows has an accessible installation system now, but you can't get speech on a Windows machine during the boot process. So it would be harder to be a Windows systems administrator than a Linux systems administrator.
Thanks, John.
I'll ask the question that I put in the chat. Would a Raspberry Pi as USB serial peripheral that does text to speech be helpful? Does something like that already exist?
Yeah, that's funny. I was just thinking about that just the other day that it probably, now you can't buy hardware synths anymore. And so what are blind systems administrators going to do about accessing the kernel messages as it boots? I don't know. I guess you'll have to start using their phone the way you would if you're a Windows systems administrator. But it would probably be valuable to have something where you could go USB port to USB port and then have the speech on a remote device. You can kind of do something like that actually for kernels that still support a serial login. You know, you can, that was even before, I don't know, that's been around since the 70s, where you can connect serial port to serial port and get boot messages that way. I haven't done that in 30 years, but you need two computers with serial ports, which is hard to find these days too.
Yeah, Grub supports serial terminals, and the Linux kernel should be able to output even early print K to serial on server class devices. So maybe I'll email you about that if that sounds like something you want to talk more about.
Sure. I mean, it's similar to what I did at one time. I had something called, I don't know if anybody ever heard of Solcris. There's sort of a predecessor to the computer on a board like the Raspberry Pi, and it was in a little case with this, and I had a serial port put into it, so I could bring it up to the server room and use it, you know, serial port to serial port, getting boot messages that way in a real drop dead emergency.
This has been great. Thank you again, John, for your presentation and sharing your highs and lows with us. It's been very interesting. For our upcoming months, we will have our regularly scheduled June call, which will be sharing some information on that topic shortly. July, we will not have a meeting because of PERC. And then August meeting will be a PERC recap. So we hope you can join us for those. And until then, we will see you guys all next month. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
John.
Thanks, John.
Sorry about the unmute button. I have no idea why it wouldn't work.
Sorry about that.